today and presenting.
Sure thing. Hi, everybody. I'm Jim Brown with the MCW Office of Research and excited today to present the reform process that has been established over the last year by our office in partnership with our Freighter, Oakrick, and CPS colleagues to help streamline clinical trial activation. So to start, what is reform? Reform stands for Research Financial Optimization and Risk Management. What it is in the scope of clinical trials activation is really focusing on reducing rework and redundancies that happen in the activation process, clarifying research budgets and billing, which tend to be the most complicated and longest parts of the activation process. Our goal is to improve activation. I think, as most people know, as an organization, the focus of leadership and as a whole is to improve our clinical trials activation timelines with a goal of 120 days, which is a lofty goal, but a realistic goal. And so with that, reform is being proposed as part of that solution. But again, reform isn't the full activation process. We're just talking about one component of the process as it relates to feasibility, coverage analysis, and budget. Ultimately, our goal is to protect everyone's time. Everybody's time is valuable, and especially as these trial opportunities come to fruition, we want to take advantage of those opportunities and get them open for our patients. So our goal is to partner together with study teams and PIs to help alleviate some of the challenges in the activation process and work together to get these studies open. I just wanted to highlight the quote from Dr. Jonathan Kerman from Department of Medicine. Dr. Kerman has been a great partner with a couple studies going through the reform process, and he's been very pleased with how it has supported his studies in pulmonary. He's also a very involved PI, which we've appreciated his partnership to the point that he's even invited sponsors to be part of this process as well. So more to come. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge everybody listed on this slide here because this has truly been a team effort, again, with the Office of Research, with our Freighter Oakrick partners, as well as MCW CPS. This group has been working collaboratively for well over a year, first on with Encore Financials, but then using that as a springboard for reform, how we can make things better to support clinical trial activation. So again, some are in the room here and some are online, but I want to give a kudos to everyone listed here for their dedication and understanding as we developed and tried this process. So thank you guys. The goal again with reform is we're your partners in the activation process, and by having a team of centralized experts really who are well-versed in the billing processes, coverage analysis, having defined contacts for budget development, negotiation with sponsors, and facilitating that financial activation process, and working together upfront to help identify where potential roadblocks may exist in the activation process, and at the same time work together to avoid downstream corrections. So with reform, why this matters to CRCs, first and foremost, because you guys do so much and do everything. So in addition to managing the regulatory components of activation as well as operational startup, on top of seeing your existing patients, reporting data, and everything that goes about in your day, when it comes to trial activation, the most complicated part truly is working through that feasibility, working through developing the billing grid, which is truly the framework for coverage analysis and for the budget, working through budget development and negotiation, which can involve some tense conversations with sponsors at times. All of this involves a lot of back and forth communications, not only with sponsor, but internally within our respective offices. CRCs are really looked at as that go-to to understand all of the parts. And as we found, and no offense, but it's hard to be an expert on all the things. And so again, looking at that discrete component of coverage analysis and budget is where our focus is at play here. And so the goal of reform again is to reduce those burdens, what's on the shoulders of study coordinators to take that burden off of you, not add to it and work together. I put the icon of the merry-go-round because I think we all feel this way sometimes, that you're on this never-ending merry-go-round, that you feel like you addressed a question and then it comes back around like 3 months later. And so that's really the goal of reform, to get us off the merry-go-round, that we get the answers, we move things forward, and we keep things moving towards activation. So that's where we're here to help. To give a little bit of background about the reform effort, looking at our current state of study activation, which is very sequential and fragmented in that process. Reform came out of the Encore Financials implementation, which we went live with in 2023. And what we found at that time, and for those who are familiar with this clinical trials life cycle graph, is that how top heavy it is in that top row for study teams to manage all of those front end aspects. And again, that's including all the financial tasks related to activation. What we found centrally, again, with our OPERT partners, within the IRB, grants and contracts, all of the groups that support study activation, is experience is definitely variable by department, by coordinator. And specifically with the billing grids, we found that is complicated work. It's even complicated work for our experts, but for study teams to try and complete those tasks, and it involved a lot of conversations back and forth and rework and frustration. And so we want to, again, take that frustration off of study teams and do that work for you. So as a result of where things have been, it resulted in coverage analysis beginning later in the process. It resulted in studies being put on hold until things were clarified. And again, it just left the domino effect of delays and white space in the activation timeframe. And again, we're just trying to eliminate where that picking up and setting down and rework happens in that process, and putting things in the appropriate order to keep things moving forward. So where reform changes that is the biggest shift is timing. We are starting that financial alignment earlier in the process and running it in parallel with all of our additional clinical trial activation activities. So that way you don't feel that you're trying to do all of the things at the same time. It's doing things in parallel, utilizing the expertise. So one aspect feeds the other. So in this case, reform really centralizes the financial components so CRCs can continue to be involved in the process. I want to stress that as well, as this is an absolute partnership with study teams. It's not something we're taking that work and we'll let you know when it's done. The study teams and the PI are 100% still responsible for operational oversight of the study itself. And but at the same time, the coordinators are no longer solely accountable for that financial accuracy, because again, we know there's a lot of complicated information and work that goes into those preparations. So with that, we're shifting the Encore aspects and the calendar and billing grid work earlier in the process, again, to set the stage for the rest of the activation pieces, and then working in tandem in parallelized workflows. Form also gives you that those defined contacts that are available to help walk you through those aspects and give you the visibility of where the study is in the process. That's one thing as an organization we're definitely working on, is that transparency of where the activation process, or where a study is in the activation process. On a much simpler form, this takes that graph and brings it into more of a linear process, but with the reform pathway, it's putting those puzzle pieces in the right order. So starting with a central intake application that collects all of the necessary study documents, having them put into Florence, which gives all of the information we need to move forward as an organization to get that study open. So everyone's aware, as the institution continues to focus on clinical trials activation, that will become the start date. When activation is measured and start is once we receive all of the appropriate documents from study sponsors. Because as we know, sometimes they come across in 7, 8, 9 separate emails, and they expect work to be happening already. But to understand what's expected of us as a site, we need to have all of the ready information available to effectively start the process. So with that central intake, we'll initiate the calendar build and set up within Encore. The crux of the reform process is an intake meeting, and we have a meeting with all of the appropriate stakeholders. That includes the study team, it includes the PI. Again, in Dr. Kerman's case, he's invited the sponsor, and that's been really helpful. It involves our billing partners. It involves, we really can invite any stakeholders who need to be present to be part of those conversations. And that's where we're having those conversations about feasibility, the who, the what, the where, where the study is happening. So everyone's questions are addressed at the same time, rather than having all of these separate sidebar email conversations and potentially information falling through the cracks. So after that intake meeting, everybody steps away from that virtual table with their to-do list, with their questions answered, or where follow-ups are necessary. And then our OGRC and CPS partners work together, or I should take a step back. The Office of Research team builds the billing grid on behalf of the study team, which then pushes it to OGRC and CPS to manage the coverage analysis component. And then at the same time, the budget development team is already working with the sponsor on protocol-related events. Once coverage analysis is complete, then we know exactly what subject-related events need to be incorporated into the budget. And ultimately, that all ties up with contract execution. In turn, this all runs in parallel with the IRB submission. I'll get to that, but that still is the responsibility of the study teams to manage the regulatory aspects of the submission. But what this means for CRC, again, is we're working together in tandem. These processes are shifting to a parallel process, but the quality of the handoffs improve. We have all of the necessary information we need. It results in fewer downtime impact down the road, last minute ICF edits and amendments that come, which are often to be expected at this point. It does not delay IRB submission. Again, the IRB is supportive of the reform pathway because it's giving them the quality information they need for a handoff for their reviews. We do have standing visit or meeting times to accommodate new protocols. So we have a meeting cadence of twice weekly. And in our intake meetings, we've been able to limit them down to sometimes less than a half hour. If everybody comes prepared and comes ready for the conversation, everything gets hammered out and we keep things moving forward. Again, just to highlight with reform, who owns what. This is a true partnership. We're working collaboratively with the study teams to make sure that everybody knows where the study is at a given time. And there's clear ownership of who's responsible for what. So the study team continues to maintain responsibility for the initial, intake of the study, collecting those documents from sponsor and all of those being that primary contact with the sponsors. Once we have the intake form completed and all of the necessary documents added to Florence, that's really when the clock starts ticking. And then on the reform team side, we're doing that feasibility review. We're addressing those questions where maybe we don't have enough information, and if we need to get clarification from the study team, from the sponsor, we're identifying those things up front. So again, once we come to the intake meeting, those questions are addressed right out of the gate. As I mentioned, from there, we'll take care of setting up the study in Encore, take care of the billing grid build, the coverage analysis, budget development, and negotiation with sponsor. And at the same time, the study team would continue to work on the regulatory components, submit the funding proposal, the grants and contracts, and then maintain that oversight once the study is live, continuing to manage patient enrollment and post-award processes. So to highlight our progress to date, so we have over 35 projects that have been logged with the reform process, and we are working in partnership with the Cancer Center. So 19 of those have been with the Cancer Center CTO. That standardized intake application that I mentioned involves all of the existing forms that occur today that study teams have to complete their OGRC application online. They have to do the operational feasibility tool. For non-cancer studies, they need to complete an Encore request form. If depending on the location of studies, some departments have their own specific studies. So what we were doing is consolidating all of those forms because they are very redundant with each other into one platform. To date, we've been using a Word document to facilitate our discussions, but we are moving forward with a REDCap form. So with completion of that REDCap form, all the necessary stakeholders, so whether that's IDS, if it's the TRU, if it's radiology, all that study information can automatically get punted and sent to them rather than, again, the coordinator remembering, oh, I didn't email so-and-so. Again, letting the systems do the work, providing everybody with the information they need that a new study is coming down the line. We've also established a central box folder to share communications. As we know, we have a lot of red tape working across different organizations. So sometimes technology doesn't always behave. And so we found that box allows all the right stakeholders, regardless of what organization you're working with, can access the documents that they need to facilitate moving things through the reform pathway. As mentioned, we're utilizing Florence e-binders for transparent access to study documents. So you're not having to remember if you sent a document to somebody or if it's going to shut down somebody's inbox because it's a 400-page protocol. By having it in Florence, everybody, again, regardless of organization, has ready access to the documents they need to do their portion of the activation process. I already mentioned about our biweekly review cadence. So teams can expect that once they've submitted their application, as long as we have everything we need, that your meeting will be scheduled within 2 weeks to get that moving down the line. And again, our goal is to reduce that rework post-activation, that we've addressed all of those things we need to on the front end, so we're not doing all of that additional effort once the study's approved. To highlight some metrics so far when it comes to the timing with reform for our non-cancer studies that have gone through, the time from billing grid development to passing it to OPRIC to initiate the coverage analysis review is a median of 6 days. Oftentimes the billing grids are complete. Sometimes they are even complete at the end of that intake meeting or just require a few adjustments so they can move forward really quickly. More complicated protocols might take a little more time and effort to clarify things, but again, ideally within a week, that grid is done and moving forward. And for those coordinators who have done a billing grid for Encore Financials, you know how long it can take. So that we definitely consider a win. The sign off between OCRC and CPS is often same day, that they've completed their review of the billing grid, knowing that it meets all of their needs and expectations with the relevant information. So as long as they have what they need, that review is timely within the same day or next day. And then when it comes to budget negotiation, the median time has been 112 days. It is largely dependent on sponsor responsiveness also. Again, that's not only measuring the time within the Office of Research, but it's also measuring how long it sits with sponsor to respond. So, and as a whole, the median time for reform for that period has been 117 days. And I know as we talk about 120 days for total activation, our goal is to continue to whittle that time frame down, and we have the support of leadership to continue to grow our teams to have the resources necessary to continue to grow support. This is a screenshot of what we call the intake form, or what we're calling the RFIT, or Research Feasibility Intake Tool. And again, the goal of this is to standardize that intake. So regardless if it's a non-cancer study, regardless if it's a cancer study, again, it could also lead to adult and pediatrics, that everybody's doing the same form to kick off their study activation within the institution to facilitate those communications and make sure that all of the necessary information that we need is available from the get-go. So the REDCap form is very close to being done. We do have a few teams who have taken a look and are kind of beta testing it for us. So watch for that coming soon along with our reform website. We haven't gotten that up quite yet, but we are excited for this form to really help streamline and eliminate that duplication of effort that teams are seeing today, having to complete multiple forms. So again, with reform, one of the things we found in our experience is it doesn't eliminate the protocol complexity. It eliminates the complexity of the process or taking on some of those more complicated parts of the process. But some of our studies that were submitted in our pilot phase have been pretty complex, working on cancers or CAR T and cell therapy studies in the non-cancer space, which is new for our campus. So we had to work through some of those complexities as a group, which it was a learning opportunity, not only for us, but for the study teams. And I think everybody could recognize that having subject matter experts in that area engaging together as a team to work through some of those situations definitely helped, as opposed to a coordinator having to try and navigate that space on their own. So we found, and why we're requiring having all of the documents available truly helps accelerate the review. If we have the information we need, we can hit the road running and move forward. If we're missing documents, it often leads to delays. So that's why we're asking for those required documents up front. Reform really works best when everyone is engaged early. So as you have new studies coming down the pike, and I'll get to that, we are happy to support, but just engage us early rather than having to revisit or re-review things that may have been done already. One of the other things that we've noted, is amendments. As we all know, amendments can impact the activation timeline, especially when sponsors are giving us multiple amendments during that activation time. So as an organization, our plan is to come up with a policy on how we address amendments during the activation process so we can keep the process moving forward and not having to stop, redo all the work that was just done, and again, keep things moving forward. So just to clarify a couple misconceptions, what reform is not. Again, I just want to highlight reform is not replacing the CRC or study team engagement. We need our coordinators, we need our study teams, we need our PIs to be part of this process for it to truly work. We are not adding another approval layer. There is no official reform sign off or anything like that. We are truly facilitating part of the process to keep things moving forward. With that, we're not duplicating efforts. We're trying to utilize the tools we have with Encore, with Florence and other things to make sure that things keep moving forward. All the information is transparent and we're not getting in each other's way. It will not delay your IRB submission. I think that's a misconception because oftentimes one of the first things people start with is I'm going to start my PRO and I'm going to start my IRB submission. And then you have to set it down while you work through some of the feasibility aspects. So we're working through that feasibility up front. So the quality of your IRB submission will be better once it's submitted. So, and again, the study team would be responsible for that component. It does not increase email traffic. And I think I always look to Maureen because the number of emails and time that is saved by just everybody coming to the virtual table, asking their questions, having their questions answered and walking away with your to-do list saves so much time in email. And again, you know, when you're in the throes of study startup and you're dealing with emails from the sponsor and the PI and everyone else, that's where if we can eliminate some of that extra space in people's inboxes, that's our goal. And again, it doesn't require duplicate document submission, and everything's going into Florence and moving forward from there. I think the biggest takeaway is that the documents in Florence are maintained, that the most current version is always available. So it's accessible to all stakeholders involved in the study. When it comes to reform, really our goal is to reduce rework. We want to eliminate that picking up and setting down and having to take another trip around the merry-go-round to readdress something that you thought you had completed weeks before. We're focusing on centralizing the complex financial tasks that are often a burden for teams. We want to increase the activation predictability. I know we all do those feasibility forms. How long does it take you to get a study open? And truly it is a big unknown. So the goal is if we can get a study and eventually get to that point to say 120 days or less, that's our goal. truly, we want to protect study team bandwidth. Again, we know you guys are busy. We know your focus first and foremost is the patients that you see and making sure they have everything they need and supporting your PIs. So if it's taking on some of this complicated work, to take that off your shoulders, that is our goal. And again, all of this is tying into the larger institutional activation timeline improvement goal. So what this means for you is clear contacts that you know who to go to with questions, earlier budget and billing alignment in the process, fewer sponsor clarifications, because again, we welcome them to the table, and the sponsors who were involved were very receptive to being part of the process and where we're going with this. Again, fewer post-go live corrections, because we're addressing those things on the front end rather than trying to clarify down the road. And that allows study teams, again, more time for patients and study execution. So, you know, really our goal is that we want the trial activation process to be predictable, streamlined, standardized, and not painful, because we agree it has been a painful process. So with that, reform really isn't about changing who you are as coordinators and what you do. It's removing that complexity that probably shouldn't have been put on your shoulders in the first place. So with that, we invite you to partner with us. We are always looking for new studies for the reform team to support. And with that, we have a couple criteria here. We ask that we've been site selected, but that the study has not been initiated with the IRB yet. That the protocol has been entered into Encore and the calendar has been ordered. That all the available documents are in Florence. And we have a great companion guide that's posted online on Infoscope that gives you by study type, if it's a drug trial, a device trial, if it's a cell therapy trial, what documents are needed. And you can share that with your sponsors. Then a completed RFIT. Once it's online, we will be sharing that link widely for folks to use. And any study, all complexity levels and sponsor types are welcome. It can be an IIT, it can be industry. Send it our way. And right now, the easiest way to reach us is anchorfinancials@mcw.edu. So I will, before we touch on questions, one last thing. Just to remind everyone that MCW Research Day is coming up on Thursday, March 12th. I understand an institution-wide email just went out today. So the schedule of events is available, but a great day to celebrate all the amazing research that happens at MCW. There's a keynote speaker, there's 4 poster sessions, there's a research staff awards and welcome celebration, as well as a support expo in the morning. I hear there are Cranky Al's Donuts present there. But also to mark your calendars on that afternoon from 3 to 5, thanks to Betsy Pollock and her team. They received a grant from Frederick's Thrive group to host a staff appreciation event. And this is truly a fun event to just celebrate all of the hard work that everybody does. Again, whether you're patient facing or if you're behind the scenes, everybody works really hard in our field. And so it's a time to just, you know, be together, not be on a screen in a Zoom box, and have a chance to just have a little fun with your colleagues. There's a photo booth, snacks, raffles. So hope you can make it. But with that, I will happy to answer any questions.
One question, internal in the room.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, what is your awareness of other institutions that have a similar kind of program? Like what percentage, if you had to take a guess?
Great question. We met with UCSF in San Francisco, and we modeled the reform effort after their Office of Clinical Trials Activation, or OCTA. They have a very similar component to manage these financial aspects, where the study teams manage the regulatory and operational side of the studies, but when it comes to financial, and they've been very successful. Their activation times are under 120 days. They're aiming for 90 days. And in fact, as an organization with the clinical trials, activation work group, we just met with them last week again, and, it's very impressive to see what they've done.
Is there a cost to?
There is no cost. There is no cost. Again, part of this is, from the Office of Research side, we are funded from central funds. And so with that, it's, you know, really, Dr. Christakis and Dr. Nadinger, have committed the resources needed to help support clinical trials activation. And again, with this component, it's really just helping that complicated piece, and then working in partnership with Oak and CPS, because those workflows tied to their workflows, how we can work together to keep things moving forward smoothly.
That answered the first question in the chat, was if there were any fees associated with reform, so no.
No fees.
The next asked question is, can you share the link for the companion guide?
Absolutely. I know it's in the, Emily beat me to it. Thanks, Emily.
Somebody
so-
drop it in the chat.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
What was it? 'Cause I'm not on the things.
I can share it after
Oh,
the fact.
that'd be
So it's on our Encore Financials page,
Okay.
but, and we're working on a reform page. Research Day has to be done first. But after that, the goal is to get a reform website up and running, so that we'll have, some of those companion documents and information available.
And a couple more questions. I'm just gonna go in order. The next one is, when will the red cap link go live?
Soon. We're very close. I would say hopefully within a month. Yeah. This month, I would say within the month of March. Not in the next 2 days, but, I would say within the next month, we should have it up and running. And, as we get new reform, studies, we may start sharing that link and having teams help us beta test, and we want that feedback too of what's helpful, what's not. What's nice with the red cap form, and again, shout out to Emily and the team who's been working on that. It has the branching logic, so if your study isn't a device study, it's just gonna skip that whole section. So it's really that choose your own adventure based on the type of protocol you have. If it's cancer, if it's non, if it involves the true or not, it'll skip that whole section. So we're excited again, just to keep things as streamlined as possible.
Will pediatric studies teams be able to use reform?
Great question, and I wanted to address, because I know we have several peds friends on the call today too. I think with reform, again, right now, it came out of Encore Financials, which our Department of Pediatric Studies haven't the pleasure of going into Encore Financials yet. But I think there are aspects of the reform that absolutely can support pediatric studies. It's a little different with the coverage analysis side of things with Freighter and the MCW CPS, since all of that is handled, coverage analysis is handled on the children's side. But thinking of a centralized intake, thinking of budget support, just thinking of having that phone a friend. Yes, I think that's where reform is. The goal is, as an enterprise, we have become better at activation as a whole. So we haven't had an opportunity to get that far because, again, really reform came out of recognizing where some of the gaps and challenges that were occurring with Encore Financials came to light, to address those. But and certainly there's opportunity to partner.
And then another question. Thanks for all the questions.
Yeah, keep them coming.
Please drop more. How does reform work with grant-funded clinical trials?
We haven't had one yet. Oh, no, we have. So
Just the same.
we would manage it the same way. So I think what we found with the grant funded, because the departments are responsible for their funding proposal. They're responsible for working through the items of the award with grants and contracts and with the funding group. But from the activation standpoint, facilitating the budget, which again, knowing the budget might be different, If it's not a for-profit sponsor, we're still facilitating the same pathway to keep things moving forward.
Thank you. No more questions in the chat so far.
All right, I got another one.
Yeah.
At the intake meeting, who would be standard to be there? I know my PI would never go, which is, I think, fine. So whatever. So I would be there as a coordinator. Somebody from Oak Creek would be there. Like who would be in that intake meeting?
Yep, it would be, so it would start with ideally the PI, but understanding they're busy. The coordinator and study team, it would be, the sponsor would be welcome to join if they were available. It would be our Oak Creek and CPS participants. It would be members of the budget development team. And then if there's anyone else we needed to invite, I'll use the example of our the non-cancer CAR T. We invited the staff from HEMONC who facilitate those studies because they are the experts in that space. So whoever needs to be, it's not a exclusive party. So really if the more who can take away information from that meeting to facilitate their work, it's fine. We would ask those, everybody comes prepared to speak through the protocol and some of those
Right.
logistics.
And then you had said, I think I understood that there would no longer be like the Oak Creek form that we would fill out because it would be kind of filled out prior to
Correct.
that.
Yep.
In the,
Yep, so it's taking that operational feasibility tool as it exists today, plus the Oak Creek application, plus the information from other units, plus the Encore form, because there's so much carryover.
Yeah.
That wouldn't it be nice to do it one time and then from there, it's just where the questions are clarification.
Okay.
Where additional information might be needed and if it means going back to the study sponsor, or if they're there, they can answer the question. That's the goal. So it's one form.
And it would, most of it was built up out of that operational feasibility tool, but what Jen mentioned is it has that cascade functionality now where it's not on you to decide whether or not that question does or doesn't apply. It's built into that
Right.
form. So if you answer this, it's only going to show you the questions associated to that type of trial.
and then that central box that you'd be using, would the coordinators have to be entering a bunch of stuff into that? Or you said you had been using, I guess I didn't understand what that.
Right, so the central box is really to facilitate the review, to facilitate that intake meeting, so, and our team has grown in the last month, so Kayla Birschbach, she's on the call, she is our dedicated intake person, so as the RFID gets submitted, she's verifying all the records that are needed in Florence. If there's anything missing, she's gonna, have back and forth with the coordinator to make sure we have what we need, and then schedule that intake meeting. She'll set up the box folder for that study. So then that RFID can go in, and as additional questions are added, so as Oak Creek has questions, as CPS has questions, as the budget team has questions, the coordinator will know before the intake meeting and may even have a time to address those things beforehand, which has been really helpful in making those meetings efficient to let oh, the question was answered. So really it's used to facilitate that collective review. Because again, not everybody can use SharePoint, if reader can't access MCW SharePoint or, so that's what we found box.
It's primarily like our team who's using it, not the study coordinators uploading.
It wouldn't be like,
Right.
please upload this.
Correct. That's what Florence is for.
Oh, got it.
This is the document home.
Got it.
This is really to facilitate the review.
Mhm.
What's your ideal study capacity at any given time? Like the sweet spot?
Great question. We haven't gotten there yet. But I think, we've calculated on average, there's 4 new studies a week, cancer and non-cancer.
For you currently?
Currently. Cancer Center is managing because they have an activation team, they have a budget team. They're managing their portfolio, but they're following the reform pathway. The goal is Cancer Center would hopefully, do the same intake form. So again, everybody's doing it the same way and it would just route to their team versus routing to the reform team. But with, you know, even room for growth, if we had for a week. And again, at the activation, as things go out the door, there's time to start working
Sure,
on the
yeah.
next one until you're hearing back from the sponsor. So there is that ebb and flow that naturally happens. So in the meantime, while the budget team is working on your budget, you're moving ahead with the regulatory and those and the operational aspects of the study in tandem.
Do another question.
Yeah.
In the chat. If a team has a project they are ready to move forward with and wants to use reform, is the current best step to email encorefinancials@mcw.edu, or what is the best first step?
Let's start there. Yep. Hi, Vesper. If you want to email us there, we will have a reform email at some point. But so right now that hits our entire team in the Office of Research, and then Kayla will intake it. She'll provide the RFIT for you to start. And even if you want a preliminary conversation, or for anyone, if you have a study you're thinking about and you just want to ask a couple questions ahead of time, we're happy to chat too. So. I will turn it over to my colleagues in the room and online if anyone wants to add just experiences with reform or anything I may have forgotten.
I mean, I think what you highlighted with the emails, we have saved so many back and forth emails by this structure, and that is a huge win. I think in my mind is just of that we're all spending the time anyway. Why don't we spend it together and not over emails that create delays?
A 30 to 60 minute meeting with all the right people knocks out so much effort that isn't necessary.
And I will also add, I just came from the Clinical Research Billing Compliance Conference. 46 other states were represented there with 200 plus colleagues who work in organizations like ours every day, and every organization is, struggles with this, and has varying structures of how many resources, who does what, and oversight. But this is the way that those organizations like UCSF, like Mayo, like some of these bigger orgs that presented, they've all done the drawing the line, to the centralized financials pieces because of the complexity.
Yep.
So we're doing the right thing here institutionally, and we all are invested in the downstream product and want to help everyone get to that lower turnaround time. So partner with us, and we promise to help you get there.
Something.
Maureen. Yeah, hi, everybody. I just want to add that once the budget work is done and it's negotiated and finalized and the Encore Financials configuration is complete, we have a handoff meeting where we'll meet with you and explain everything. So we've done those in a couple different ways, but rest assured that that information will be communicated in great detail to your teams, so that you know how to go forward once you get that first patient on study. And then after that, even more, once that first patient starts going through visits, we'll do a first on study quality meeting. So we're going to look at all the financials and see how everything drops in Encore Financials, help you with that study startup invoice. So a couple of post-award tasks there that we'll do after everything is complete in Encore Financials.
That's Maureen's favorite space, is helping teams get their money.
I do love that.
And with that, I think too, on the front end, the budget team is going through all this work to have a complete budget to make sure we're covering our costs for the life of the study. And so once that budget's in place, it's only as good as using it to go get your money. So and make sure things are covered. So that's been nice to help reinforce those workflows on the back end.
Curiosity question says, will reform assist you probably can see that too. Will reform assist with budget amendments or possibly in the future?
Yes, because, and that's one of the things, again, because we know amendments just throw a wrench into activation. And the goal is to keep things moving forward, and then, with the exception if it's a patient safety amendment, the amendments can wait until we're activated and then address them. So if you saw on the screenshot of the RFIT, but we have an amendment button, and part of that too is notification, because our partners, whether, people submit amendments to the IRB, but if Oak Brook doesn't know that there's an amendment, or it's an amendment that may impact the budget, then, we're creating, opportunity for risk. And so, yes, the goal would be to, help facilitate where it's needed to, to make sure we're current, but again, keeping the studies moving forward to get them open.
And would that apply for amendments post activation?
Yeah.
Maybe
There's lots of nodding heads in the room, so yes, the answer is yes.
From the BD perspective, we're setting these protocols up initially so that when the amendments come back, we can rapidly go through those. So it's really important to be able to continually attack things on the same level. It wouldn't be right or reasonable to expect the coordinator to pick up something when they didn't do it initially. It's more efficient. We'll still know the process. If you're taken out of the process initially, again, it would be irresponsible for us to ask you to kind of just jump in the deep end of the pool and figure it out, because then we're running into the same problems with amendments that we are now, and also that we ran into with which was the impetus to start reform in the first place.
I can speak on behalf of the Oak Brook nurse consultants that we found reform has gone smooth because there's a solid cadence, like there's a predictability on our workflow, and there's a process that works. To Dr. Kerman's point of saying that we work more synergistically instead of sequentially, I think that's really made a difference for our work. So, well absorbed in Oak Brook.
I think one other thing to touch on that we're actively exploring too is utilizing automation where we can. So taking that red cap form, not only to facilitate notifications and emails, but also red cap can have a connection to Encore. So rather than, it having to enter your own information in the RFIT and then it being manually entered into Encore, red cap populates Encore, which in turn Encore pushes to Florence, which creates your binder for a place for all of your documents to be held. On the Freighted side, it would lead to populating the RSH record in the study. So using technology and taking that human element and redundancy out of it. So, that's where we're going, is just how can we have that funnel where it's funnel in, funnel out, that we're taking care of, all of the necessary aspects of a study in the right order with the quality of the handoff for all of the respective parties, to get it done. Yes, cheers to our PEDS friends,
Yeah.
but yes, any opportunity. I met with Sylvester just yesterday. I talked to Teresa all the time. Becky reaches out, and, so anybody that has questions, both from the pediatric side or in general, if you want our team to come and do a shorter version of this with your teams or your departments, we're happy to do so. Again, there's a lot of opportunity here, and right now we're just trying to build that trust, and take on new studies to continue to refine the process as we go. We have 8 minutes. If there's more questions, throw them in the chat if you want to unmute. Or again, if
Any questions at all?
yeah, if anyone else on the team wants to weigh in.
We talk about 120 days is ideal, right? How are we defining day one?
So day one will be, this I can tell you, with the clinical trials activation working group, a larger effort. Day one will be when all of the documents are received. And we have to figure out where that's being documented,
Okay.
but that will be when the clock officially starts ticking. Because we know sponsors are tracking our activation timelines, but part of that is also for them to understand as an organization, this is what we need to move the study forward. So it will be, we need those required documents before we can do anything else. So, and again, that checklist, you can share it with them. That's okay. Because I think that's what helps drive a standardized process and expectations of a site. We want to provide a quality service to the sponsor. We want to make sure everything is done for our patient safety and so day one is we have all the documents we.
Just some kudos in the chat.
Thank you.
There's a great job. There's a thank you to the team for advancing this amazing initiative. Thank you, Samsung SM S911.
Thanks, Samsung.
How are you, Samsung?
Said Lori.
And the goal of hundred and 20 days is for this process to be, or the whole process?
That's the whole process.
Activation.
That's the whole process from
Including your IRB?
including IRB. So that's where, again, the parallel processes help because things are happening in tandem, but they're in the right order. So you're not starting that IRB too soon
Right.
without having certain things in place. But there's definite discussions. How can we eliminate, as they say, the white space? Because there's so much time where you set it down and you're waiting for someone else to pick it up. How do we pass that baton more quickly to keep things moving, or where what processes are contingent on the one before it?
What's a reasonable turnaround time
And-
for that white space?
So it's lofty, but it's attainable.
Yeah.
And I think it, you know, collectively, we know clinical trials activation can be better, but as an organization, this is a commitment that our leaders are, that we need to get there. And so we have to start somewhere. And so part of that is consolidating resources where we can to tackle some of those more complex things. But again, working in partnership with teams. We want to be transparent. We want to be collaborative. And again, but everyone's goal is to move trials forward quickly.
We don't need the approved or draft approved consent form to start the reform. Process.
You don't need it today either. That changed when we went live with Encore Financials.
You want to say that louder, Betsy?
You don't need it either now. That changed when we went live with Encore Financials. We were fine accepting the sponsor's draft consent through the reform workflow.
Okay.
We will, work with you on the
Yeah.
cost language because the coverage analysis is happening in the right order now.
Right.
Yep.
I just always find you have to learn a protocol. You get this 170 pages. You have to know it as a coordinator. And the best way to know it is to start your ERO and do your consent form. For me, that's just the best way to do it. If I don't and I hand everything off, then I think I'd be like, I don't know what's going on.
Well, and I mean, certainly you can start working on your PRO.
Right.
We're just asking, don't submit it because
Right, no,
we're gonna have to
submit it.
pull
No,
it back
right,
from the IRB to make changes. So, that's where you do your RFID, start working on your PRO.
Right.
And those pieces, because that falls to the coordinator bucket. But while RFID or while reform is happening in tandem, then if there's answers you're needing from sponsor or based on feasibility of, I don't know where this is happening. Is it happening in the truth? Is it happening on the floor? That's where that intake meeting can really help clarify those things. So your IRB submission then is crystal clear to send it out.
It's like our old school Oakland process.
It was so nice. We all sat in the same room with radiology and
Mhm.
everybody else, and you'd go, "Oh, really?" And all that.
Couple more comments.
We're going back to the way it used to, I guess.
A couple of more comments too, Beth. Remember when you're working on your application and your consent, coverage analysis, because what we're talking about is coverage analysis, the impact of coverage analysis on those documents. There's really two sections that are hit with that. The the cost to subject section and the injury section.
Mhm.
And that applies to both the consent form and the smart form. If you do the rest of the application minus those two sections or put some kind of draft language in those sections, it's not going to take very long to finish those off.
Yeah.
And then just another comment too about the activation timeline. Conversations that we've had with sponsors about the reform process and the intent to hit that 120-day mark. One of the comments, because one of the things that I recognize, you recognize anyone involved in research or negotiations as the sponsors recognizes is things go in to the sponsors and you're at their mercy. You have no ability to control it, no ability to do anything else. But when we share the goal of 120 days and point out to them the ability to meet that mark is also depend upon their response time, their ability to do things they're interested. And the comments that I've heard is, if that's your goal, then we will work with you to make that mark because it is more sites they have activated early, the quicker they can finish their trial.
Right.
Great questions.
Yeah, that was
Great
so
questions,
great.
great conversation. Again, please email if you have questions. Happy to keep the dialogue open because our goal is to help.
Thank you so much for presenting today
Yeah.
and leaving such a great amount of time for all the questions. It was a lovely session.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Keep your eyes peeled. I know many of you guys come to this monthly. And next month we have a presentation on reliance agreements. And stay tuned for topics beyond that monthly throughout the year. So thank you guys for supporting the education here as well. We always appreciate.
Thanks for hosting.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody.